Good morning, everyone. Are you awake out there? So when Cliff asked me if I'd say a few words about St. Paul's and the role of St. Paul's in my life, two things occurred to me right away. First of all, I'd be happy to do it. And second of all, there are a couple of caveats. One is it's not just about my commitment to St. Paul's, but it's about Barbie's and my commitment to St. Paul's. We each get something different from the institution, but we both have a strong commitment to it and to its support. So this is what I'm about to say, I think, concerns both of us. The other thing that occurred to me is that Cliff is a real optimist, because asking a professional academic to say a few words about anything is optimistic. So just a couple of things I want to say. First of all, Barbie and I are not cradle Philadelphians. Barbie grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in Connecticut. We moved here about maybe 35 years ago from Connecticut. And like many who are not born and raised in Chestnut Hill and have spent all their lives at one religious institution or another, when we came to Chestnut Hill, we were looking for a spiritual home. And there were two things that drew us to St. Paul's right away. We experimented with a couple of other churches, but the two things were, number one, and perhaps in some ways equally as significant as number two, is we were visited by a parishioner shortly after we moved to Chestnut Hill, a parishioner from St. Paul's. And she knocked on our door one Sunday afternoon, and we invited her in. We spent the next 45 minutes or so just sharing our hopes and what we were all about. And she shared with us what her experience at St. Paul's had been. And I think that personal touch was really significant for us in drawing us to St. Paul's. Now, I realize each of us has our own story about what draws us here. And Barbie and I just wanted to share our story. The second piece of it, of course, is the music program here. And Barbie's been in the choir since we arrived here, and I'm sort of a trailing spouse on that one. But the music program is another thing which is drawn us in. Now the next question is, so that drew us in, but what keeps us here? What has kept us here? And there are a couple of important things for us, anyhow, in that regard. One is spiritual nourishment. We find St. Paul's is a place where our own spiritual needs are met and met well. But a second and equally important dimension of it is the engagement and involvement that we've both been involved in since we arrived here. It's Barbie's participation in the choir. It's my participation early on in teaching Sunday school and doing a lot of other things, but which drew us in and which have kept us in. It's another dimension of that engagement is service on the vestry, and both of us have served on the vestry at very different points in time. But I think that service on the vestry was really interesting for us both, because what it did for us is it gave us a different perspective on the institution, on the church. Instead of being simply beneficiaries of the programs and the variety of opportunities that are out there for all of us here at St. Paul's, it gave us a sort of a behind-the-scenes view of the complex set of things that it takes to keep the lights on, to keep the doors open, and to keep the institution running as smoothly as possible. And I think that experience of being on the vestry and seeing sort of backstage some of the issues that the church faced, helped solidify our commitment to St. Paul's, our commitment both in terms of just being here, but also in terms of supporting the church financially. As most of you know, currently there's a bit of a gap between the budget for the coming year and the number of pledges, the amount of pledge that has been received so far. A budget is something that's aspirational. We hope, if we get this amount of money pledged, that we will be able to run these programs. And if there's a gap, hard decisions have to be made about what to cut. And we all have different attachments to St. Paul's, different things that draw us here. And some of us like one thing, some of us like another. And to have to cut any program, any activity is very difficult and is going to affect some of us. So hopefully there will be, among those who haven't yet had a chance to pledge, some will be able to do that. And for those of you who have already pledged, you may find that you may be able to do a little bit more to help close that gap. So let me just finish with a sort of a perspective on church and sort of what is church for us. And it's something different for everybody, I think. But for us, there are three things about it. One is it's a place. And as a place, it is a place where we find spiritual nourishment and where we find opportunities for contemplation and for reflection. Number two, so it's a place, it's also a community. It's all of you and many more who have become friends and spiritual co-travelers over the years. And that's an important piece of church. It's place, it's community, and also it's a set of beliefs. And I think that's, in some ways, most important for Barbie and me, because those beliefs are beliefs about priorities, they're beliefs about values, and they're beliefs about the kind of things that draw us all together as human beings in humankind. We find those to be important. I think it's true that, at least for Barbie and me, today, in a world which is in evolution, I guess we could say, the church is a place which offers some sense of stability. In a world where sort of old certainties are changing, are being challenged, and where new questions are arising and being pursued. And I guess what we find is that as we're being buffeted, or our sense is that we're being buffeted by a bunch of external forces which produce divisiveness, they produce fragmentation, they produce discord in sort of the world around us. What we find here at St. Paul's is important, it's reassuring, and we find that it's really worthy of supporting however we can.